June 1st, 2025. Well, another month has passed. Well, it looks like we have another increase in tariffs. We've gone up to 50% on steel and aluminum. So I guess this is, I guess we're at that level. I presume that we're counting on being completely self-sufficient in steel and aluminum, and I presume that there's still enough existing factories, in spite of all the things that have happened over the many years, to handle those desires, or else at a 50% tariff, price of something is going to go up. But at any rate, that's the latest decision from President Trump. And of course, we've to great applause from some steel workers, and of course the so-called Nippon U.S. Steel deal, and it's will be the which is an interesting point. From what I've seen on aluminum, though, I find it interesting that certainly it doesn't seem that other than the U.S. steel, everything else seems to have kind of not really gone up because of these tariffs domestically. Yes, that is in terms of, at least if you're looking at the values of the companies, the stock that supposedly will be benefited by this. But anyhow, so certainly, I see Alcoa is still down about what, 7 points from where it was when it first put the 25% tariff on. So I don't know if 50% will help or not. At any rate, so that's the latest on that. It also seems that on the Chinese front, it looks like the Chinese haven't really been agreed to all the details, haven't really been carrying out their commitments on the deal that they made where they reduced the tariffs down to 30%. I'm also kind of interested to know how well the trade with China is going at 30%. Um, I guess the question is how we'll see how that impacts prices and so forth. Um, we did have an increase in the wages of 0.8% in the last month. I guess so. That's a positive trend for workers, and although it's unclear exactly what led to that. I mean, um, perhaps people are scurrying to hire workers to make up for things that have to be made domestically, or is it just some other aberration in the data? Um, the revision in the gross domestic product has basically, I think we're still being down 0.3%. We're down 0.2% in the first quarter. So, although I'm not sure how much that really relates to anything other than the uh, attempt to hold down inflation by the Federal Reserve. And of course, I know that. So, anyway, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications, or you can follow me on the Rumble in the description below. So that's kind of how things look on the economy right now. Um, Essentially, the at the end of the last year, I think that the efforts to fight inflation have sort of led to the normal decline in activity. You sort of do that. Whereas on the other hand, with labor jumping, that probably will do nothing to convince the Fed to lower interest rates. I know that the President Trump had a meeting with the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, and was trying to push him to lower uh, the interest rates, but so far apparently there was no progress on that. And the problem is two things there. One is uh, uh, he's pretty convinced he's not going to be reappointed for another term, and the other, because of various statements that have been made. And the other thing is that the Supreme Court, in one of their rulings on the ability of presidents to fire various appointments, excluded the Federal Reserve Board from that ruling. So he can fire other people, but not members of the Federal Reserve Board. So kind of locked in on that one. Um, so that's kind of how that goes. At this point, given that you've got a really mixed situation where a lot of the efforts of the administration are probably going to push prices higher eventually. By the way, of course, the latest numbers that came out, I guess, for the month of April, it would be the interest, the inflation appeared to be under control. However, I'd point out that was projected even before the first tariffs were announced, that things would remain relatively cool on inflation until you get into the summer by various financial sources, at least that I follow. So it isn't too surprising, and I think the other aspect is that the companies are still wearing down their inventory of goods that were imported prior to the tariffs. And of course, there's that gap there for some time where nothing was coming in from China, for instance, because of the very high tariffs of 145%, which have since been reduced. So that but I'm questioning, will things be anything like normal at 30%? And they may go up if Trump sees that China's cheating, that could lead to an increase. Uh, it's also generally considered that Trump's ultimate goal is to have a permanent 10% tariff on almost all imports. So and maybe higher on some particular countries, such as maybe a China or something. So anyhow, that's kind of my little economic rundown. But it looks like things are at any rate the market has been trending up lately, and in fact Trump's approval rating has trended up from the little dip that he had after the initial tariff imposition. So although, but all in all, he has fairly strong approval ratings at this stage, I think, compared to what he was in his first term. Um, Perhaps because he's more on the offensive in this term than he was in 2017. If we recall, that was when they started all these investigations and nonsense. So anyhow, so that kind of is a quick rundown of the economy trends and what we think will happen. It still looks to me like it's a good chance we're heading into, if not a recession, at least a stagnant period. And inflation probably will start to increase, I would think, once we get into the summer. We'll see if I'm right or wrong on that one. But you can't really, you know, replace overnight foreign production with domestic production without sort of stressing the inventory, if you will. And I think that I'm also, I've said before, and I'm kind of that opinion that ultimately we're going to have um, some issues because we're in a near full employment economy. So where do you get the labor you need to replace some things? For instance, if we'd really try to, at this point, replace, for instance, let's say auto parts, for example, or computer chips or everything else domestically, where do you get the skilled labor to do that work? Because a lot of the people are already are skilled in that way are already working and doing what they're doing, and so so there you have it on that. So that's kind of my assessment on that we're going to see more inflation, and we're probably going to see the Fed not lowering interest rates, which will probably lead either to a recession or at least a stagnant economy. Well, again, I don't think you can take 1 or 2 months of data too seriously when you consider the trends that will probably be going forward. Um, so, at any rate, on the other hand, we've got another little thing that will affect the economy is we've got the situation with the Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham sponsored 500% tariffs on anybody trading with the Russians, at least in terms of oil, I think, and a few other energy items, which will be interesting. Whether or not those really get imposed or not, certainly it looks like the votes in Congress are there to do it, and certainly it looks like it could get through the Senate pretty easily. What happens in the House is a little unclear. However, the discharge petition, presumably regardless of what the Speaker tries to do, it probably could get through, and there should be perhaps enough votes to override if Trump were to veto it. But Trump has not really endorsed this yet, but he does hint he might want to do it. He's been kind of, I think, dodging that issue, and we'll see what happens. But if that occurs, the big sign will be exactly how does China react to that. I know the other issue has been this decision to try to end visas for students from China, And of course, one of the reasons for that obviously is that this is part of the way that the Chinese gain Western technology in order to support their economic competition and military competition. And of course, that's another step in that direction. And of course, the Secretary of Defense, Hegseth, has just made a speech encouraging various countries in the Asian area. I presume that means like Taiwan and and uh, and Japan and maybe South Korea to increase their defense spending. I doubt that South Korea would need to increase too much. They're pretty solid on defense anyhow, seeing what's the north of them. But the Japanese are certainly one area where there could be some expansion in defense capability. And so we're waiting to see what happens on that. But and that looks interesting. So anyway, that's kind of my view on rundown economic issues, and I know that we'll just have to see. You know, I know they were flirting with 50% tariffs on all European things, but now it will just be, I guess, steel and aluminum for the moment, and so we'll have to, kind of see how that evolves and watch that situation. So that's kind of about it. By the way, I would like to point out that I really encourage everybody to to subscribe to my channel here. Like for instance, I was watching Daniel Davis deep dive and what he was talking about on today's broadcast. I pretty well covered on the one I put on last Tuesday, and mine was a little bit shorter and more succinct, I think, but I think I covered the key points. So, at any rate, we'll keep at this, and I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the links to my social media accounts are in the description below. So, all for now.